Hello and welcome to This Week in Laker Football. It's your weekly look into everything about the West Bloomfield Lakers football team. We'll recap last week's game and take a look forward to this week's matchup as well, and talk to some players and coaches along the way all season long. I'm Tyler Kieft, alongside West Bloomfield Lakers head coach Zach Hilbers. Zach, a big win last week at home, your home opener against Stoney Creek, 40-33 a final score, but it was a really interesting game, a lot of back and forth, a lot of good from your team, and a lot of good also from Stoney Creek. What do you think was the key difference in ultimately being able to escape a little bit of a scare from the Cougars?
It was a little bit more than a little bit of a scare. I mean, I don't know, maybe it was a little bit of a scare from upstairs in the booth, but on the field, it got real really quickly, and in our team meeting, I told the kids, we were right there inside the 1 yard line. I think the score was 33-14, and we fumbled a snap. Now, if we punch that in and go up 40-14, we're really in a really good spot. We're in control, and they can't do the things that they want to do on offense. We can't get them outside their comfort zone. But, it didn't happen, and they stepped up to the challenge. They had a long touchdown drive, recovered an onside kick, and scored again. And, about 5 minutes later, you're looking at a game that's 33-30. And give their kids credit, man. They did not give up. They're tough as nails, and if we can find a way to win games where some bounces don't go your way, I guess that's a good thing. But also, we got to help ourselves a little bit and not get in those situations.
Going back to the early portions of that game, what stood out from the jump was Stoney Creek's ability to hold on to the football, continue to make progress up the field, and really sustain those drives. How did that affect your defense as the game went on, knowing that whenever that team was going to have the ball on the offensive side, they were going to give you a big battle?
Well, you got to give their coaching staff and their players a lot of credit. They threw a lot of stuff at us, a lot of different formations, unbalanced formations, I guess non-traditional stuff. And then they paired that with motions and just a lot of movement, and it really did a good job of, mixing our kids up. And there's a lot of plays where we just weren't lined up right. And give them credit, but also that's on us. We got to be a little bit better than that. It took us too long to adjust, and then as soon as we did, they would switch up. So they were definitely really well prepared, and we just got to emphasize that and get better at it.
On the offensive side of the ball, from the jump, big chunk plays again, kind of the key this week. We saw that first drive answering that nearly 8-minute drive of Stoney Creek, one play to Elijah Durham for a touchdown. As your season goes on, though, that's something I would imagine you want to be able to kind of take one out of Stoney Creek's book and sustain some of those drives a little bit better, as great as those big scoring plays were. But how do you balance that as a coach and as someone that's coached the offensive side of the ball too, that drive to score, but also the necessity to hold on to the football and give your team's defense a little bit of a relief?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's definitely a balance there. But, at the same time, it's we thought we had a mismatch on the outside with some of our guys, and we're never going to not call plays that we think are there. They're going to work. But like you said, they had an 8-minute drive. We scored in a play. They had a long drive again. We had 27 points at halftime, and we had run 11 offensive plays. And that means our defense was on the field a lot. And then, like I mentioned, in the second half, they had 2 consecutive long drives because of the onside kick. I mean, that really contributed to them being able to, wear us down and gradually, progress down the field. Big plays are great, but it does put your defense in a tough spot, But we can help ourselves, too. We were in 3rd and longs against them as a defensive unit. We didn't get off the field, and that, allowed them to sustain those drives. And if we can do a better job of getting off the field on 3rd down, all of a sudden, we can kind of flip the script on them and get us in a better situation.
And credit to your defense, too. Despite that sort of war of attrition, particularly in the first half, keeping your defense on the field and really giving them a challenge at all 3 levels, you were able to hold them to just 14 points, maintain a 13-point lead heading into the half. What did your defense do well to answer what Stoney Creek was doing really well all throughout that first half?
Well, I think, like you said, they rose to the occasion for a few times in the first half and got off the field. And as the game went on, we didn't do as good of a job of that. And then even to start the second half, after we scored after the kickoff, we forced a fumble, and that's when we got it down to the 1 yard line. So they stepped up and made some opportunistic plays as a unit. But all in all, one of the emphasis we had was that we got to be better tacklers. We kind of bounced off some guys a little bit this week, and then just get off the field on 3rd down.
Zach Hilbers, the head coach of the West Bloomfield Lakers varsity football team, joining us on This Week in Laker Football. 3 consecutive wins to start his coaching career, now going back on the road out to Lake Orion on Friday. Kickoff for that game is at 7 o'clock against a Lake Orion team that, much like Stoney Creek, very well balanced, a lot of talent on that team, and off to a very hot start. So heading back into the details of this past week's game with Stoney Creek, how does a game like that help to really put into focus just how competitive this league is and where your team needs to be going forward in order to compete at a high level against not just the OAA Red, but some of the best teams across the state when playoff time comes around?
Yeah, I mean, we tell the kids that all the time, and I think they hear it and they believe it, but it's a grind week in, week out, and that's a lot for, I guess, the kids at that level to process, because they know that we have some talent on our team, and we look at it and we're like, we thought they'd have a tough time guarding us in the back half of the secondary, which was true. But football is it's a team game, and it takes a complete 60 minutes to get all that stuff done, and 48 minutes to get all that stuff done, and there was ebbs and flows of the game and waves where obviously they pushed back and made stuff really difficult for us. And I think if we responded just a little bit better and stronger to some of those adverse times, we would have found ourselves in a better spot.
And in terms of those younger guys on your team, we saw some of those guys down the depth chart that have been getting a lot of playing time so far this season with injuries in your first string and absences in your first string, but had a really nice game on supporting tackles, on lead tackles last week against Stoney Creek. I think about someone like Blake Simmons, who was involved in so many of the stops that you were able to make. Speak to their development early in the season, playing really competitive football against veteran teams in those first 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys that fit that, and Blake's definitely one of them. He's a really tough kid. He's kind of, waited his turn. He's a senior. We know he's tough. We know he's physical, and now he's got this opportunity with some of the injuries we have. And he's done a good job, filling it. He really has, because it was, kind of getting thrown into the fire second quarter against Chippewa Valley. And, he would always play in spot duties and packages, but now it's, full out. Here we go. Sophomore Will Espy did a really good job coming in, making some tackles. He had a 4th down stop. Brody Pecor's kind of done the same thing as Blake, just in the middle. We want him to play defense, but not in this role. But we need him now there, and he's done a really good job too.
Yeah, defensive line also excellent on both sides. Your edge rushers and Jonathan Gabriel and Brandon Davis-Swain having big games, putting pressure on a very talented quarterback in Jaden McCarthy and helping, especially in the second half, to keep that pressure applied and ultimately give you that little jump that you needed to ultimately get past Stoney Creek. The Lakers defeating Stoney Creek last week Friday, 40-33. They head off to Lake Orion this Friday for a 7 o'clock kickoff against the Dragons. Both teams 3-0 overall and 1-0 in the OAA Red Division coming into this week's matchup. And so, Zach, your lasting thoughts, Coach, from this past week and some of the good that we saw, but also some of the bad that you're really focusing your team on this week as they head out to Lake Orion.
Well, every game, week to week, there's stuff that presents itself as areas of improvement and opportunities to grow and get better, right? And if you can find a way to win and still find a way to get better, then you're in a pretty good spot as a team. But it's on us to look at what happened against Stoney Creek and get better at it. Because if we don't, we're going to find ourselves in the same exact situation again. So, some of the kids were just kind of awestruck and shocked at the way that second half kind of turned on us a little bit there. But they buckled down and we got out of there with a win, which is ultimately the most important thing in the game. So if we can just, like I said, this week after our walkthrough today, get a couple of good practices and really take that next step forward, I think we'll be all right.
7 o'clock kickoff on the road against Lake Orion in Dragon Country at Lake Orion High School. That game on Friday night. The Lakers will have their second consecutive game in the OAA Red Division. We'll talk more about that later on as the Lakers have a tough rest of the way this season against the OAA Red and out of their conference as well. We'll take a break on This Week in Laker Football. On the other side, we'll dive a little bit more into the defensive line, get to know one of the people behind this year's stellar defensive front, and then later on preview the big game on Friday at Lake Orion. Stay tuned. You're watching and listening to This Week in Laker Football on Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM. Low snap, getting chased and getting punished. There's Brandon Davis-Swain getting in on the section, taking down the quarterback.
Looking for a score, a schedule, a story? MHSAA.com has you covered. Our newly redesigned website has everything you need to follow high school sports in Michigan. And it's optimized for mobile use. Fans can submit scores on a Friday night, check playoff pairings and game times, or read about the student athletes from your community. Your first stop is MHSAA.com. Connect with us online and get everything you need all in one place.
Welcome back to This Week in Laker Football, your exclusive look week to week at the West Bloomfield Lakers varsity football team as they pursue yet another state championship and playoff appearance. I'm Tyler Kieft, joined now by defensive line coach Eddy Wilson. Eddy, a really impressive defensive line this season, already making a lot of problems for opposing quarterbacks, especially over these last 2 weeks. Your defensive line, particularly on the edges, has been scary against quarterbacks at Groves and last week against Jaden McCarthy at Stoney Creek. What is it about this defensive line, about the personnel, that makes this year's D-line seem special in comparison and even growing off of these past few years where they've had really talented front sevens?
Well, we've got a hungry group of guys, young and hungry. They've been developing all summer, right? Got them early, around March, April, I believe, when I first came back to really get hands-on with them. And they've been grinding ever since. They want it bad. They understand the assignment. They realize the shoulders that, they stand on, right? With a lot of great groups coming through here, including myself in that 2015 class. So as far as preparation-wise, they've got a lot of tools. They have a lot of people in their ears, right, former players, myself, and really understand the importance of them playing well. So with them understanding how they have to play, they pretty much live up to that expectation these past 3 weeks and go into work each week with that on their shoulders.
It helps I would imagine, to have senior leadership, particularly on the edges, and Jonathan Gabriel and Brandon Davis Swain, who know what it takes to be successful on the football field at the high school level, and in the case of Brandon, how to aspire to that next level and get that sort of high level recruiting at the college level, which is a big motivator for these players. How does that senior leadership help, particularly with those younger guys in the interior and those down the depth chart who are also getting a lot of playing time so far?
Yeah, well, leadership is important, especially in this sport, right? Guys like Brandon and Jonathan, they come to work, going back to that, right? Work is where it starts and where you get to see it pay off on those Friday games. But they come ready and willing to listen, take in as much information as possible, be students of the game. Brandon's an athlete, right? He's a freak athlete, if you will, playing both sides of the ball at this level and playing it dominantly, right? Colorado is definitely going to get a great player in him, and I expect him to really just continue to grow and develop as much time as he has here at this level, right? Be a dominant player and take that to that next level. Understand the game at a smaller, faster-paced level here. So as it speeds up for you on that field, it's still slow and comes to you naturally in your mind, right? Jonathan, same way. He's a guy that comes to work. He's starting to see the game faster from that position. That's like the same point I mentioned with Brandon. When you can slow the game down in your head and play faster, you start to see those big plays being made and really see them look like effortless plays, if you will.
Eddy Wilson, the defensive line coach for your West Bloomfield Lakers varsity football team. No stranger to high school football in recent years, playing on this team in the last 10 years, with 2015 being your graduating class. Coming back, how does that perspective as a former player in this program, knowing what it takes to compete at this level, in this division, in this conference, and in the MHSAA, as you are now coaching the next generation of greats on the defensive line?
It's personal. I think that's the biggest aspect, right? Wearing the same jerseys, being in the same room, understanding exactly what those guys go through week in and week out. Same competition. Obviously, it's developed and gotten faster since I played in 2015, but still the same teams, for the most part, same scheme. So I'm fortunate, right, to be in a position to give those guys a first-hand experience and just information back to the, experience that I've came and played and gained through these years. Every single time I look at that scouting report and see those guys on the opposing teams line up, I go, man, this was me not too long ago, right? So it's special. I think my responsibility to them at the highest level, right, is to give them as much as I can while I can, which is, that senior year is the last year. So I want to not too much overload them with information, but just give them as much as I can to excel in their future endeavors.
And in terms of the support you have on this particular defense, it's really helpful, I would imagine, to have additionally as much talent at the second and the third level supporting your guys, especially when you come off a game like last week with Stoney Creek where they were really able to open up some great holes for the running backs, for the quarterback, for receivers on sweeps and on special plays also. Speak to that chemistry between your defensive line and the linebacking core and the defensive backs as well.
Well, a lot of these guys have been together for about 2 or 3 years, right? We have a pretty big senior class, which means they've came up together. They're familiar with each other as far as, playing next to each other on varsity, on JV, and the freshman level. So that camaraderie and just team morale that you get from things outside of coaching, you can't beat, right? You can't match that. So we're grateful for that. 2, like you said, the talent level, right? These guys are smart football players, and that helps. When there's smartness and intelligence on the top level, that being the defensive backs, it trickles down to the lower level. Those guys can help out with alignments, formations, assignments, recognition, and all of that. So you got a good group on all 3 levels, on our side of the ball and on offense, right, that can just be familiar with playing with each other and help each other out.
A lot of younger players in this program, whether it's at the high school level or at the middle school level, looking up to West Bloomfield High School, or even those out in the community starting their football career and looking to these guys as examples, and even to you as an example as a graduate of West Bloomfield High School. What advice do you have for young players that are just starting out as defensive linemen or exploring being a defensive lineman, for what it takes to improve over time and ultimately elevate your game to the level you got to be at to be a great player at West Bloomfield or in any other football program?
It starts with discipline, right? You have to be a disciplined athlete. That's knowing when to work and when to play. At this level, right, high school and the years before, there's a lot of different activities and life experiences that you are keen to experiencing, right? But there's a level of seriousness you have to take any sport, but especially this sport, if you want to see some sort of turnout of greatness in your career. That discipline really stems from going to the weight room, being in there, getting big, right? That off-season is important to get those gains in, getting levels, getting ahead of your competition. IQ, football IQ, studying the game, not just watching as a spectator, but really looking at your position on all levels, the collegiate games on Saturday and the pro-level games on Sundays and Thursdays, and really studying your position, studying the game, learning. And then last probably thing I'd say is mastery, right? Becoming a master of the game. What does that mean? It's really putting all 3 together. One I forgot was just the effort aspect. So the IQ, the discipline to get stronger, faster, become a better athlete, and just the mastery, putting all 3 together and becoming what you feel like you can, the best.
And that helps to go up against some of the best. The Lakers taking on Lake Orion on Friday at Lake Orion High School, a battle of 2 teams currently at the top of the OAA Red Division. The winner takes the spoils top position in the league going forward. Eddy, appreciate your time.
Appreciate you, sir.
A lot of attention to detail and discipline will go into preparing for this Friday's game. You can tune in all across the community. Lake Orion versus West Bloomfield. Got to be the game of the week here in southeastern Michigan. We'll take a break. On the other side, head coach Zach Hilbers will rejoin us. We'll preview this week's game at Lake Orion before we wrap things up. We thank you for joining us. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more on This Week in Laker Football. Kicks the snap, hands it off to Parks. They attempt a flea flicker. The ball is loose. McCarthy chasing it. He gets shot. It's still loose. Lakers recover it, but do they have it in bounds in time? That's the question. The ball was loose as it rolled out of bounds. It appears that they do have it. They did recover it fully in bounds in time. Justin Tyler doing a little hula hoop on the sidelines. We see this one. The flea flicker goes over the head of Jaden McCarthy. He's just trying to get on top of that football, doesn't fully secure it, gets absolutely slammed by the Punisher, Brandon Davis Swain, and Tyler able just barely to secure that football with 11:03 to go in the third quarter.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too...
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
Welcome back to This Week in Laker Football, your weekly look into all things about the varsity football team at West Bloomfield High School. I'm Tyler Kieft, alongside once again West Bloomfield Lakers head coach Zach Hilbers. A huge game coming up on Friday. Every game's a big game at this point in the season when you're in the thick of OAA Red Division play. But these next 3 weeks are arguably the toughest looking at your schedule. Lake Orion followed by Rochester Adams. Then you go back on the road to play Clarkston. So how did last week's game sort of define the road ahead in this OAA Red Division schedule going forward?
Well, one of the things like we always say about football is that it mirrors life and that it's going to guarantee you adversity at some point. So like we got thrown in a ton of adverse situations on Friday night and we came out of it okay. So we just hope that that puts us in a better place, week by week going forward. Because like you said, it's going to be a challenge. And, if you think about those 3 weeks, it is tough. That's why we're just thinking like 1 week at a time. We know we play Lake Orion on Friday. They are extremely talented. They are on a roll right now, and we got to be playing our best football if we want to have a chance to beat them.
One thing that Stoney Creek was able to do really well was move the football on the ground, and Lake Orion's got one of the best running back cores in the entire state of Michigan this year, led by Billy Roberson. So in terms of how you approach that this week, knowing that there was a bit of a struggle in the run defense last week, is there any difference in how you're approaching trying to negate the progress of a running back like Roberson or others on that team, knowing that he's been able to take care of business so far this season?
Yeah, he's a really, really good player. I told the kids he's one of the best, in my opinion, best 3 running backs in the state. He could be the best running back in the state. He runs hard. He's fast. You've just seen his progress and his growth over the years. And he's a load. But he's not the only part of the running game. Quarterback's a great runner, too. Raymond Payne runs a ton of jet stuff for him. He's a fast kid. So they can hit you outside. They can hit you inside. Billy can himself and the other guys with their jet game and their misdirection. So it's definitely a challenge. And, our kids are kind of taking that, though. They're taking that, I don't know if personally, but they're kind of accepting, embracing that. These guys are really good, and we got to step it up, and we got to bring it and match the intensity if we want to have a chance to stop it. So that's what it takes. It's going to take focus, it's going to take intensity, and it's going to take the basic football stuff, like lining up right and tackling right.
And look, you were a football player, you were a quarterback. These kids, they look at the schedule. They know the teams that are going to be a bit of a challenge for them, a team that maybe won't be as much of a challenge for them. And they approach these games each very similarly. Every game is important. But do you see a change in that mindset and that focus for young players at the high school level as they approach a game like this, knowing that it has big implications, knowing they're going up against a very good team and have a chance to really make a big splash out in the community?
Yeah, and I guess the short answer is yes. We often do see a change. I don't always love that as a coach because you want them to, attack each week with the same, ferocity and vigor. But also, they're kids and they understand that this is going to be a challenge, and they're mentally locked in, and hopefully we're physically locked in this week because to beat them on Friday, we're going to have really good days Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Zach Hilbers, the head coach of the West Bloomfield Lakers football team, joining us on This Week in Laker Football. What's something that stands out for you when you look at this Lake Orion Dragons team this season and how that kind of mirrors that Chris Bell style of a team from years past and even the John Blackstock era in Lake Orion?
Yeah, so it's kind of you see a combination of them there because Coach Blackstock's still there on the staff, and Coach Bell's offense from when they were extremely successful, winning state titles and state runners up. You see influences of that, and you see influences of the last few years of Lake Orion football. And a lot of these kids that are seniors on their team, they were playing as sophomores, they were playing as juniors, and this is a year they've kind of been building for, and they're extremely confident right now, as they probably should be. And you can see in the way they play. They are going out there and they're just rolling through people. So obviously we hope that we can show up and just kind of stop that from happening.
Yeah, shades of 2019 as you're thinking about this week Friday's game. 2 very evenly matched teams, 2 very competitive teams in the OAA Red Division and across high school football in southeastern Michigan. It should be a very interesting matchup in Dragon Country on Friday. Kickoff is at 7 o'clock against the Lake Orion Dragons. Coach, any lasting thoughts this week from the game against Stoney Creek and as you get ready for Friday's game in Lake Orion?
No, other than like you said, we just have to bring it each week. If we want to be where the kids' goals are by the end of the year, it's going to take beating teams like Lake Orion, and Stoney Creek and Chippewa Valley and Groves. But this week it's Lake Orion, right? And if we can get through this week, then you got a similar challenge in Rochester Adams. You get through that, win or lose, you got a similar challenge against Clarkston. So, I guess each week we're going to be presented with a really, unique and special opportunity to go out there and prove that, we're as good as we think we can be. Right, we got some talent, which is great. So do these teams, and if you want to be where you want to be at the end of the year, you got to beat good teams, and we're going to have opportunities to beat good teams.
Northeast Oakland County, a big opponent for the Lakers over the next 4 weeks. Going to Lake Orion this Friday. Next week it's back home against Rochester Adams, and then back-to-back on the road, Clarkston and Oxford over the next 4 weeks. Coach, appreciate it.
Thank you.
You've been watching This Week in Laker Football. Come back every single week. Early on in the week, we'll review the previous week's game and preview the next game coming up. Talk to some of the players and the coaches as well. This is your exclusive inside look into your hometown high school football team. For our entire crew at Civic Center TV and the entire team at West Bloomfield High School, I'm Tyler Kieft. We'll see you next time on This Week in Laker Football.